the issue of security that you talk about, how do we prevent this from happening again? The reality, Chairman, as you know, is that it's happened throughout our recent history. Just look at some of the attacks on diplomatic compounds or facilities or U.S. interests over the years. You go back.
But you know, Gregory Hicks, in fact, testified to what happened in Bahrain under his watch.
Hold on, let me just go through.
How, in fact, they prepared for a possible attack, and they survived the attack, even though they lost a few cars.
But look at these attacks on U.S. interests spanning Republican and Democratic administrations, including President Bush's administrations. Why is there not more of an effort to beef up security after these attacks happen, and even before this happened in Benghazi?
David,
and isn't this Congress's job to spend the money to beef up security?
David, well, first of all, money is spent by the Secretary of State and her people. We appropriate the money. I have spent over 12 years, both on the Intelligence Committee and on the Foreign Affairs Committee and now on the Oversight Committee. I've visited countless embassies and consulates. I've seen both behind the scenes on the Intelligence Committee and the overt actions of what we do. And we do a great deal, and we do it well. But in areas of high risk, in areas like North Africa, and for that matter, sub-Saharan Africa, we're not really prepared for the kind of attacks we're getting. We haven't been since the two bombings of our embassies and then the Cole. So can we do better? Yes. Must we do better? Yes. But when you have clear signs and you have career professionals asking for more security and they're second-guessed not for financial reasons, but for reasons of apparently wanting a normalization, an appearance of normal, that has to be asked. Why wouldn't you let the career professionals have their way when they say, here's a risk? They tried to kill the ambassador, the British ambassador, twice. They blew up the wall at this very facility in Benghazi 2 separate times. One, they actually breached it, and yet security was cut, not increased. That's not about the broad picture. It's about this example of what went wrong.
Quickly, do you need a select committee on something like this, something like Whitewater, or is your investigation sufficient here?
You know, let's not blow things out of proportion. This is a failure. It needs to be investigated. Our committee can investigate. Now, Ambassador Pickering hit his people, and he refused to come before our committee.
That is not true.
All right, well, we're going to get to Ambassador Pickering.
We have it in writing. We have White House correspondence. It may not have been the ambassador's decision, but it was the White House decision. That has been reversed. We're inviting him on Monday, along with Admiral Mullen, to come to go through, with his papers, a private deposition so we can get the facts in a nonpartisan way. Right. We'll have Republicans and Democratic.
Well, all right, Ambassador Pickering, you just jumped in here. You're willing to appear?
Of course. I said the day before the hearings I was willing to appear, to come to the very hearings that he excluded me from. The White House told me back
please
that
don't tell me I excluded you.
Well, the majority was, we were told the majority said I was not welcome at that hearing. I could come at some other time.
Well, as the ambassador just said, the day before the hearing, if the White House said we'd like to have him, there's a procedure. He could have been the Democratic witness, and we would have allowed him. The Democrats requested no witness. The fact is, we don't want to have some sort of a staged show. We had fact witnesses. They testified. We have the ambassador and Admiral Mullen, who conducted and oversaw the ARB. We're inviting them on Monday. We'll go through, not in front of the public, but in a nonpartisan way, questions and answers, and then obviously a hearing to follow at an appropriate time. I'm delighted to have a long-serving career diplomat willing to come before us. I don't think it was his decision to say no, but we were told no until just before the hearing.
All right, well, let me do this. Chairman, stick around for just a minute, because I also want to ask you about this IRS story, but I want to stay on this theme. Ambassador Pickering, you led this investigation along with Admiral Mullen. And the criticism about this investigation is it didn't go far enough. You didn't specifically interview Secretary of State Clinton. You didn't probe into what she did or did not do in the immediate aftermath of the attacks. You focused on lower-level officials, and you didn't sufficiently address the very point that the chairman brings up, which is, why wasn't there sufficient address to the fact that there was a deteriorating security situation in Benghazi?
Let me say that I hope the chairman has read our report. Our report has 29 recommendations. The bulk of them concern the insufficiency of the State Department's preparation of that post to deal with the security challenges. I don't think that there is any other explanation, and I can't believe that, in fact, he still sits here and makes those charges. The second issue he raised was the 7 hours. We looked into this extensively with the military. Admiral Mullen himself.
7 hours. Let's talk about what you're talking about, the night of the attack.
The night of the attack in Benghazi. And Admiral Mullen and I and all the other members of the board concluded, after the testimony in which we interviewed many people, that there was no way that any military activity could have been put in place to deal with that particular question.
Chairman of the Joint Chiefs and others have said nobody could have gotten
General
there in time.
Dempsey said so. Admiral Mullen, the retired chairman, said so.
But were you not critical of the fact that there was no contingency planning
There
of
was
a chaotic situation in North Africa?
There was contingency planning, David, and that contingency planning helped. Contingency planning involved the annex coming to help the people who were under attack at the mission. And it was fairly clear that that particular set of activities helped a great deal. We may have had more people killed if that hadn't happened. We've been told that the only witnesses that are of any value are people in Tripoli. We interviewed everybody still alive on the ground who was at the U.S. mission that night.
Well, and that, Ambassador, that's an important point. We've been denied even the names of those individuals. The fact is, our committee wanted to speak to the individuals from Benghazi. They were neither encouraged nor produced, nor even their names made available to us. Look, two of the most respected career people I know, the ambassador and Admiral Mullen, who I've worked with much more closely than the ambassador, I respect them. We have an obligation to look for any of the inconsistencies. And yes, I understand that in 7 hours, they look back and say, we couldn't have saved those men. The question, one of the questions is, in hour one, what orders were given to begin the process? Who was put on alert? Who was asked? This could have gone on like Tehran. This could have gone on for weeks or months. So there's a lot of those questions. All we're really asking is, why is it that the ambassador and the admiral reached a conclusion? We have their output, their unclassified.
All right, well, let's have the ambassador. Let's have the ambassador respond to that.
You also have access to the classified testimony.
Well, actually, Ambassador, we've got the classified report, but we don't have any of the interviews you do. We don't have even have the list of everyone you interviewed. So
the list of interview, and I believe.
All right, I want to get to a larger picture, though.
No,
excuse me, Ambassador. I want to come back to this fundamental question.
Please.
Did you not pay sufficient attention to and time with the Secretary of State?
I believe we did. We had a session with the Secretary. It took place very near the end of the report. It took place when we had preliminary judgments about who made the decisions, where they were made, and by whom they were reviewed. We felt that that was more than sufficient for the preponderance of evidence that we had collected to make our decisions. And you know that our decisions was two of those people should be separated from their jobs. Two others failed in their performance.
The press secretary to the president, Jay Carney, said back in November, he talked about how changes were made, who made changes to these talking points prepared for Congress and for Ambassador Wright. This is what he said back on November 28th.
The White House and State Department have made clear that the single adjustment that was made to those talking points by either of these two institutions were changing the word consulate to diplomatic facility because consulate was inaccurate. Those talking points originated from the intelligence community. They reflected the IC's best assessments of what they thought had happened.
We know that's not accurate. We know that, in fact, the State Department, Victoria Nuland, was involved in removing from the talking points previous warnings about security and references to a terrorist group, an extremist group, being involved in the attack based on what was being reported on the ground and by intelligence. Is the administration guilty of playing politics with terrorism?
With full respect, the Accountability Review Board was there to look at the question of security. We did not examine talking points after the fact. It was not in our remit.
All right, I'm going to end on this point, which is about the IRS and this revelation. They have apologized for this. What more would you like to see? Are you satisfied with the apology? This is targeting conservative groups in an election year for tax-exempt status.
Well, you said it all. They targeted conservatives for tax-exempt status, but the bottom line is they use key words to go after conservatives. This is something you have to institute changes to make sure it doesn't happen again. There has to be accountability for the people who did it. And quite frankly, up until a few days ago, there's got to be accountability for people who were telling lies about it being done. And lastly, to be honest, one of the most offensive parts is my committee and Jim Jordan and I instigated this investigation, got the IG to do the investigation. Before the IG's report comes to the public or to Congress as required by law, it's leaked by the IRS to try to spin the output. This mea culpa is not an honest one. The honest one is, in fact, let's see the IG report, let's go through it, and then let's, just like the ambassador said on the 29 changes, which we agree with, let's see what the instituted changes need to be to make this not happen again.
All right, Chairman Issa, Ambassador Pickering, this debate will go on. Thank you both very much for being here.